Deputy Speaker.
Are there any constituency statements from members? And I call the member for Gilmore.
Thank you, Deputy. Sorry again. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, I was recently at a community event at Moruya in my beautiful electorate of Gilmore, where the community got together and wanted to present both myself and the member for Eden Monaro a petition, which I have with me today. And the petition is calling for a level 4 new Eurobodalla hospital. Now, currently around 2/3 of patients have to travel outside of the area to treatment, so often that means a really long drive to Canberra. We currently have a hospital in Batemans Bay, which is a level 2 hospital, and in Moruya we have a level 3 hospital. But the idea, of course, is to have a new Eurobodalla hospital and have a higher level 4 hospital. So people thought that the new Eurobodalla hospital would actually provide those level 4 services. But what happened was they found that that was not going to be the case, and the hospital, when it was going to be built, was not going to open with those much needed services. So the petition that I have, which I'm going to table later as a document, really calls on the government to provide and open at a level 4 service. What the hospital, if it opens at not a level 4, it actually means having no intensive care unit. And imagine having no intensive care unit. That means, again, a long drive to Canberra. It's actually going to have less emergency beds and less maternity beds as well as no acute mental health beds. So it's really no great replacement for the current Batemans Bay Hospital and the Moruya Hospital. So needless to say, people are pretty mad about that. I have been flooded with emails, with comments, with phone calls, and the community are really getting together to act on that. And what we're also finding at the moment as well is that the current Batemans Bay Hospital is being run down. And what we're finding there is, and this is in the words of Bill, and I quote, he said, "I write this from my bed in the high dependency unit in Batemans Bay Hospital. This is the last time I'll be treated here due to the closure of this unit. The same treatment I received today is now only to be had in Moruya. I am extremely disappointed with New South Wales Health dismantling of our hospital before the supposed level 4 is even started. Yes, I'm old, so appropriate saying is put the cart before the horse. This government department is dictating our medical wellbeing and healthcare. I, for one, have lost faith in them. The general public have been treated like mushrooms." And that's pretty much what people are thinking. They feel like they've been ripped off with what is currently happening. At the petition presentation—
Order. The honourable member's time has expired. Were you seeking to present the petition?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
So normally you should do it within your 3 minutes, but
I
I'm
missed that
feeling
time.
generous today. So,
Very good.
sorry, wait. Has the petition been presented to the Petitions Committee?
No, I'm just presenting it as a document.
Okay. Is leave granted for the document to be presented?
Thank you.
The document will be forwarded to the Petitions Committee for its consideration and will be accepted, subject to confirmation by the committee that it conforms with the standing orders. And I call the member for Lindsay.
When's the member for Lindsay? Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I was thinking of one of your predecessors.
Peter Lindsay, a
far more distinguished.
fantastic member for Herbert. I appreciate the call, Deputy Speaker. I wanted to talk about the Townsville City deal today, and to be honest, it is a mess. This city deal has been nothing but trouble since its inception. The Australian government, we're trying to get on with the job of the funding under the city deal, and this includes projects like the new concert hall, a business case for water recycling, for green hydrogen production, and major redevelopments for Reef HQ. However, currently there is $27 million of funding for projects which have been blocked by the Queensland State Labor Government. These are projects which the State Labor Government themselves are supporting or have been begging for. They are a new hub for the Royal Flying Doctor Service in Townsville and match funding commitment of $12 million for Lansdowne Eco-Industrial Precinct. It wasn't long ago that the Deputy Premier for Queensland was in Townsville, had a business breakfast, and he was asking, pleading, begging for these projects to go ahead and for the Australian government to commit for these projects, and we did. Now he's the very minister who is not allowing the very payments from the Australian government he asked for to flow through the state to the council as required by the Constitution. It's the exact same situation for the Royal Flying Doctors Hub, which the Premier herself included on her dot point wish list of projects she'd like funded under the Townsville City deal. So the very understandable question needs to be asked is, why is the state Labor government blocking passage of funding for these two very important, very valuable projects they themselves support? If you ask me, I don't know. I have no idea why they'd want to do this, why they'd want to play politics, why they'd reject funding that's handed to them on a silver platter. They keep putting politics before the people of Townsville. And if you ask them, the answer is they will lose 80% of their funding of their GST allocation. But this is a complete farce. I went to the Independent Commonwealth Grants Commission and asked if it was possible to calculate that any one project would result in a reduction in GST allocation in the value of 80%. The answer was no. But don't take my word for it. Here is what the Commonwealth Grants Commission told me, and I quote, "Queensland is just one of 8 states receiving Commonwealth payments. When another state receives a grant from the Commonwealth, Queensland's GST share will increase by about 20% of the value of that grant. Therefore, the final effect on GST distribution cannot be determined without considering all Commonwealth payments to Queensland together with all Commonwealth payments to other states."
Order. The 3-minute constituency statements, and I call the member for Macquarie.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on behalf of a Blue Mountains family whose daughter Katie died at the age of 34 in August this year as a result of taking the AstraZeneca vaccine. She's one of 9 deaths the TGA reports as linked to AstraZeneca and one of 8 who developed TTS. To use her dad Ian's words, Katie was a vibrant, healthy woman with no pre-existing medical conditions living in Sydney's inner west. She was a writer, comedian and performer and worked as a tour guide with Ridgeclimb and at the Butterfly Foundation. I've listened to a podcast she made last year and heard her speak of her deep passion for travel and performing, of making a difference. Katie received her first dose of vaccine in July. A few days later, she had a rash on her arm, but her GP didn't feel it was linked. On the 1st of August, she woke feeling unwell and her condition deteriorated rapidly. She was taken to RPA by ambulance, diagnosed with major bleeding in her brain. Doctors recognised this was an AstraZeneca case. That same day, she had neurosurgery and an angiogram, but didn't regain consciousness before she died 3 days later. Her family was not able to spend time with her because of COVID. I speak about this knowing that there are some in the community who will try and use what the family have said to me for their own purposes. That would be wrong. They are grieving and angry that Katie's death is a direct consequence of the government's reliance on AstraZeneca. They acknowledge that many other people have died because of the failure of the federal government to better manage the vaccine program. They know Katie listened to the urging of the government and made the decision to be vaccinated with AstraZeneca after discussions with her GP. She wanted to do her bit to help end the lockdowns for the sake of people's mental health. They grieve that she was the one in a 1 in a million risk. What's added to their grief and distress has been the total lack of contact initiated from either the government or AstraZeneca. What they'd like is for Katie's and others' deaths to be recognised in Parliament. They'd like a public memorial acknowledging those who died during the pandemic, both through the disease and vaccines, and public recognition at major gatherings in the form of a minute's silence. They'd like a vaccine compensation scheme that proactively reaches out to people who've lost a family member, one with specific timeframes, relying on an expert legal and medical panel that considers impact statements from family members and treats them generously. What they want is reasonable. They also want to see the Prime Minister acknowledge those who have died or been disabled through the vaccination program. And they want recognition by the Prime Minister of what these people have experienced and what their families have lost. and they've lost it for the sake of the rest of the community.
Order. And I call the member for Bonner.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today to recognise the small businesses at the heart of our communities and to acknowledge the support the Morrison government has delivered to keep them afloat during this time. New economic data from the ATO and Treasury analysis this week shows small businesses have received $5 billion worth of tax relief this year and next. That's $5 billion back into the pockets of these businesses, seeing the creation of 600,000 new jobs. We've also provided Australian workers, whether they be a teacher or a nurse, who are on $60,000 a year, a total of $6,480 in tax relief. Australians are better off thanks to our government. I've welcomed the comments from small businesses in my electorate of Bonner who couldn't be more thankful for the support that we have provided. Deputy Speaker, Michael Sutherland is the sales manager at Corellis Real Estate in Mount Gravatt. Being a small office with only 3 full-time staff, things were at their lowest when the pandemic hit. Corellis Real Estate were eligible for our wage subsidy scheme, which in Michael's words was a lifesaver for his business. As time progressed, it was no longer needed. Now they're focused on expansion, growing their team of 3 full-timers to 8 employees by next March. And in the Bayside suburb of Wynnum is Fleur by Ellie, a local florist which opened during COVID. Owner Ellie believes wholeheartedly our tax relief measures have had widespread benefits in the area. Given the noticeable increase in foot traffic and return in consumer confidence, Ellie has been able to expand her floristry business with the addition of a new cafe, creating more jobs and more opportunities for locals to go local first. There's also the Jungle Adventure Playground in Cannon Hill, every local kid's favourite place to be, including my 2 sons. Owner Lachlan Walker opened this business during the June-July school holidays last year. To get on their feet during this time, the Jungle took advantage of our government's instant asset write-off. In anticipation of Brisbane's hot summers, they installed aircon units, which has improved the space for children who are busy running around and climbing the equipment. Lachlan mentioned the Jungle also has 10 staff taking part in our Boosting Apprenticeship Commencements program. They are now able to upskill and train casual apprentices to become part-time or full-time employees. Deputy Speaker, this is just a snapshot of how our government's measures have positively impacted countless business and employees in Bonner. And with this Christmas right around the corner, it's the most important time of the year to be purchasing gifts locally and supporting our mum and dad small businesses.
Order. And I call the member for Werriwa.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to put before the House yet another example of how suburbs in the electorate of Werriwa are not treated equitably. I've been inundated with feedback from residents from Austral, Rossmore and West Hoxton about Australia Post's unwillingness to deliver parcels, sending residents on a 30-kilometre round trip to Ingleburn Post Office or Smeaton Grange, past closer post offices, I might add. The response that I recently received when I raised concerns with Australia Post that a delivery attempt was made in the first instance for all these parcels. However, the feedback from my constituents is quite different. One even provided me a video demonstrating this was not the case. I understand his frustration to feel the need to prove his concern. I do acknowledge that Australia Post staff are doing the best they can in difficult circumstances, but it is the Australia Post management that must provide a work environment that ensures that the service standards expected of Australia Post are met. Chris from Austral told me that there was not even one attempt of a delivery for his parcel. The Australia Post app showed his parcel was not leaving Ingleburn, so he went there to pick it up. When Chris received his parcel from the post office staff, the parcel was kicked along the ground, no trolley offered by staff to help him. 2 days later, he received a missed delivery card after he'd already picked his parcel up. This is unacceptable. However, Chris says it best himself. It is so important that we have a centralised, publicly owned service to handle what is now an integral part of our economy and day-to-day modern life. However, it's clear something's terribly amiss in Australia Post that they would even allow this to happen with zero answers to fix the problem. What my constituents are also upset about is the lack of infrastructure in place in Austral, as new residential homes and the parks and trees are still lacking. There'll be 17,000 new dwellings put in Austral soon, and that puts it on par with New South Wales regional cities. Australia Post needs to ensure that a parcel service continues to account for this population growth and service the customers and businesses now. Ms Ismail from Austral told me the issue is ongoing and will only become worse as the number of Austral residents rise. Worst of all, they're all paying for postage and for the delivery to their homes. All residents deserve free, fair and easy access to postal deliveries no matter where they live. I call for more Australia Post outlets in more convenient locations in my electorate to cater for these growing suburbs. Australia Post is an essential government service and my constituents deserve much, much better.
Order, and I call the member for Mallee.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mildura is one of the most geographically isolated major regional centres in Victoria. For travel to Adelaide, locals must travel 4.5 hours by car and 6 hours to Melbourne. It underscores why the Mildura Airport is so important to so many people in Sunraysia. In a normal year, 280,000 trips are made to connect people with their loved ones, medical treatment, work or holidays. It is significant that 7% of these flights have had to redirect due to adverse weather conditions. Of course, safety must come first. But diverting flights causes delays that can be profound to people's lives and timetables. It can leave people stranded in other cities overnight. I know, I've had to do it myself. Particularly for those travelling for medical reasons, delays can be very difficult to manage. Mr Deputy Speaker, I made an election promise to address this problem for the residents of Sunraysia, and I've campaigned successfully for an instrument landing system. This week I was proud to open Mildura Airport's new instrument landing system, funded by the Community Development Grants Program. The Morrison-Joyce government paid $2 million for the ILS and was added another $1 million from the Mildura Rural City Council and $1 million from the Mildura Airport. The ILS provides the lateral and vertical guidance necessary to fly a precision approach in times of low visibility and fog. This project will provide critical safety and security measures for planes to land rather than be turned back to Melbourne or Sydney or wherever they've come from. The physical installation of the equipment has been completed and the design procedures are currently being finalised to go live in February 2022. The ILS project secured 23 jobs throughout construction and will create 50 going forward. Residents of Mildura and surrounds will now be able to fly with greater reliability and peace of mind with this critical infrastructure. It's calculated that Mildura inbound and outbound flights will boast 99% completion rate, rather than 93% without the ILS. Mildura Airport also serves as an emergency landing base for commercial flights, and this upgrade will ensure enhanced safety in the event of an emergency. Such that occurred in 2013 when 2 jets, a Qantas and a Virgin, from Sydney and Brisbane and bound for Adelaide managed to land safely in fog in Mildura. This was a high-risk situation, but due to low fuel, there were no options left. The ILS will profoundly reduce the risks and make this kind of approach much safer. The Liberals-Nationals government is committed to efficiency and safety for regional Australians and is delivering...
The honourable member's time has expired.
Well.
It has expired, well. I call the member for Bean.
Deputy Speaker, at the start of the year, my local Labor colleagues and I wrote to the Minister for Communications calling for improved NBN infrastructure in the nation's capital. Canberra's NBN infrastructure is undoubtedly the worst of all the capital cities. The network is comprised of more than 70% fibre to the node, higher than other major urban centres around the nation. It's inferior to fibre to the premise or to the curb, and it doesn't deliver the performance that a modern broadband network should. Canberrans are not the only ones frustrated. Australia has slipped to 59th in the world on broadband speeds and ranks 32nd out of 37 OECD nations. This is not good enough. It's a drag on our economy. It has undermined the competitiveness of small business and left sectors like health and education reliant on patchy, outdated technology. Furthermore, this government promised to deliver the NBN for $29.5 billion. Their patchwork of second-rate technologies costs nearly double this. We have a second-rate network that costs twice as much, a clear demonstration of the government's technological and economic incompetence. Labor will fix this mess. We understand the need for world-class digital infrastructure in the post-COVID economy for schools, small business, regional communities and growing industries such as advanced manufacturing. Labor's plan to boost fibre and fast-track NBN repair will deliver and will create 12,000 construction jobs along the way. And Deputy Speaker, people in my electorate know firsthand that we have the most to lose from inaction on climate change. One only has to look at the summer bushfires of 2020 to see the evidence. But my community also knows that we have the most to gain, both locally and globally, from climate change action. We are a territory powered 100% by renewable energy, a target that's driving investment in our region, bringing jobs to the economy. The world is moving rapidly towards renewable energy, and we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity for Australia to jump ahead of the pack. But, Deputy Speaker, Prime Minister Morrison is leaving Australia increasingly isolated on the world stage on climate policy. On this side, we care about outcomes, not just announcements. On this side, we care about conviction, not just convenience. We will underpin our climate change policy with 4 key principles: net zero emissions by 2050 with a strong roadmap to get there; ambition backed by policy, understanding that climate policy is good jobs policy, and that regions, including our capital region, will be at the centre of those policies. We will take action that will create jobs, drive investment, cut power prices and reduce our emissions. The truth is, and it's time for honesty, we have to stop the toxic politics and start addressing one of the great challenges this nation has faced. The opportunity is there and Labor is ready to work with our communities to embrace it.
Order, and I call the member for Longman.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In my electorate of Longman, we have one of the largest veteran communities in Queensland. I've had the pleasure of speaking to many of these veterans and their families, whether it be at the veterans forums I've hosted, out and about at community events, or at Vietnam Veterans Days, Remembrance Day and Anzac Day services, or just helping them with inquiries through my office. I would like to take a moment and thank them all for their service. We can never underestimate the importance of ensuring that our veterans have the support and services they need to live and work comfortably in our communities. After all, they have fought for us and the country they love. It's now our turn to return the favour. That's why I've been fighting for funding for a Veterans Wellbeing Centre to be based in the heart of Longman. This would provide our veterans, their families and current ADF members who have begun the transition into civilian life are supported and have greater access to wellbeing services and support in the Longman community. I was fortunate to recently visit the Oasis Townsville with my colleague, the member for Herbert, Phil Thompson. They provide a single front door for all members of the ex-Australian Defence Force community, current members and their families. This is what I want for our veterans living in Longman. I want Longman's Veteran Wellbeing Centre to provide simple access to local services specifically designed to meet the needs of our veterans. We want to help connect veterans and their families to a range of core services including support for transition, employment, health and social connection and advocacy through the centre. I don't want our veterans to ever feel alone or feel that there is no help in sight, because you can count on me to fight for you. The federal government has made addressing the development and management of mental disorders such as depression, post-traumatic stress disorder and other anxiety disorders for the veteran community a high priority. The mental health needs of veterans are diverse and rapidly changing, and veterans generally experience PTSD at higher rates than the general population. That is why wellbeing centres for our veterans are vital in helping them manage disorders or traumatic experiences. As part of our commitment to veterans across Australia, the federal government has announced further funding as part of the 2021-22 federal budget to expand the Veteran Wellbeing Centre network to Tasmania and South East Queensland, with $5 million in funding being allocated to each of these locations. This is great news for many of our veterans and their families. I want Longman to lead the expansion of the Veteran Wellbeing Centre network in Queensland so that we can can support the large veterans community in Longman. It is my hope that we can find a way to build this facility in Longman to service the needs of our substantial community of veterans. Thank you.
Order, and I call the member for Cornwall.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Some time ago I had the opportunity to meet with Safe Ground, which is an Australian NGO who works to minimise the impact of weapons of war. They came here into Parliament and I spoke with them. They came to discuss with us the issue of lethal autonomous weapons systems in the lead-up to the global diplomatic discussions that will reach a critical juncture next month at the United Nations in Geneva. Without doubt, artificial intelligence technology has great potential to bring benefits to society across a range of applications. These technological advances, however, must be developed and implemented with appropriate oversight and regulation. The global proliferation of increasingly autonomous weapons is occurring amidst the absence of new international regulations that address the challenges caused by these emerging weapon systems. Rapid advancements in technological systems compel us to not only re-engage with, but to also advance fundamental notions of human rights well into the future. You might call this, Deputy Speaker, future-proofing of our human rights. The fundamental and underlying principle is this: international humanitarian law must continue to apply fully to all weapon systems. Under this principle, like-minded countries have raised concerns about the ethical, legal, operational and technological issues associated with lethal autonomous weapon systems, particularly where human agency is removed from decision-making on issues of life and death. Germany and France have highlighted the indispensable need to maintain meaningful human control over new weapons technologies. Closer to home, Deputy Speaker, New Zealand has emphasised the legal, ethical and human rights challenges posed by the development and use of lethal autonomous weapon systems. And in our own region, India has in some respects expanded on the issue of meaningful human control by cautioning against the potential for states to legitimise these weapon systems with broad references to what the term meaningful human control actually means. Deputy Speaker, this is particularly important because such an awareness goes to the heart of the issue of accountability, not only in terms of consequences, but also the ability of such weapon systems to reduce the social and political thresholds with respect to decisions of whether to engage in war. I know some of my colleagues, Deputy Speaker, are equally concerned about this issue, and especially the need for Australia to support meaningful and legally binding international instruments with respect to lethal autonomous weapon systems. This includes the need for Australia to support the establishment of legally binding rules regarding specific prohibitions and limits on autonomous weapons, as well as support for the implementation of a normative and operational framework in the area of autonomous weapons within the instruments of the United Nations. Australia should prepare and articulate a national policy that strictly regulates and defines human control and responsibility with respect to such weapons. And I want to thank Safe Ground for the incredible advocacy and work that they do in the national interest.
Order, and I call the member for Page.
Deputy Speaker, thank you. I want to thank my community for getting vaccinated in large numbers. In my region, Deputy Speaker, first dose is at 95% at the moment and second dose is close to 90%. Vaccination has allowed us to open our economy and it has also meant our hospitals haven't been overrun. Deputy Speaker, I'm vaccinated, my family's vaccinated, and I want to thank the health workers who have worked in clinics across the country. Deputy Speaker, as we approach the completion of the vaccination rollout, I think it's very important for the state government to lift restrictions on those who have chosen not to be vaccinated. I understand why state governments had restrictions when vaccination levels were low, but they are not low now. We can't have a segregated society of those who are and those who are not vaccinated. We have achieved levels, indeed some of the best vaccination levels in the world. So, Deputy Speaker, I will continue to lobby the state government to lift these restrictions on those who choose not to be vaccinated. We live in a free country. And while I don't agree with those who choose not to be vaccinated, I respect their right to make this decision. Restrictions on their lives need to be lifted. We have arrived at some of the highest vaccinations levels in the world, and therefore the segregation needs to end. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to acknowledge Eulalie Hayes for more than 60 years of service to netball in the Clarence Valley. In 1963, Eulalie and her sister Narelle responded to an ad in a local paper looking to establish a women's netball team in Grafton. 8 years later, Eulalia was coaching 10 teams, was also the then treasurer of the Grafton Netball Association for more than 10 years. In the 70s, she was made a life member of the association. Her 38-year involvement with the Grafton Netball came to a close in 1998 when she retired from work and moved to Galmarad with her husband Barry. Eulalia then spent many positions in the Lower Clarence Netball Association, including president, rep convener, coaching convener and treasurer. She received the Club Person of the Year and the Ernie Muller Award in 2010 for her contribution to Lower Clarence sport. And in 2012, she was awarded the Lower Clarence Netball Association Life Membership. Eulalia is still an active member of the association and is at the courts every Saturday during the season. She's a mentor to players and coaches. She also has a coaching award and a court named after her in Grafton. Eulalia, your contribution to netball in our community is outstanding, and I thank you for this. I know your family, Barry, your 3 children, Tanya, Rosalind and Martin and Terry and Kate, as well as your 5 grandchildren, Kyle, Joel, Ryan, Hannah and Piper, are all very proud of you.
Order. In accordance with Standing Order 193, the time for members' constituency statements has concluded, and I call the clerk.
Committee and Delegation Business, Order of the Day number 1, Report of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Corporations and Financial Services.
The question is the document be noted, and I call the member for Clark.
G'day, Deputy Speaker. Yes, I rise to comment on the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Corporations and Financial Services report, regulations of the use of financial services such as credit cards and digital wallets for online gambling in Australia. Deputy Speaker, I think this was good work by the committee, and I fully support the 3 recommendations from the report, which are: 1, the committee recommends the Australian Government prioritise the collection of data on online gambling in Australia, including the size and growth of the online gambling market, online gambling with credit, and the extent and nature of the associated harms. The second recommendation, which I also support, the committee recommends that the Australian Government develop and implement legislation to ban online gambling service providers of wagering, gaming and other gambling services, but not lotteries, from accepting payment by credit cards, including via digital wallets. And the third recommendation, which I support, the committee recommends that the Australian Government ensure that in designing and implementing recommendation 2, these measures have no adverse consequences for lotteries, including the activities of not-for-profits, charities and news agents. Deputy Speaker, as good as all that is, regrettably, though, it doesn't go nearly far enough. And we have an explosion of online and sports betting in this country, requiring the most conscientious attention by the federal government and the implementation of a raft of harm minimisation measures, because we don't want online and sports betting to become like poker machines. You know, it's an emerging, well, it's been out there for some years now, but relatively emerging form of gambling, a rapid uptake, particularly by younger people and younger men, and we have an opportunity to intervene reasonably early in the evolution of this form of gambling to make sure that the most effective harm minimisation measures are in place. And, Deputy Speaker, the obvious thing to regulate is to require the Australian online gambling companies to link their pre-commitment arrangements in real time, so that when any gambler reaches their daily limit on one platform, then they are shut out of all platforms provided by Australian online gambling companies. We need to do that because at the moment we have this ludicrous situation where someone in good faith sets a daily limit with one gambling company, and when they reach that gambling limit, they just close that app and open the app of another Australian gambling provider. They gamble away, maybe they reach the limit on that one, and then close that app and go to the next app. And before you know it, a gambler, particularly if they're a gambling addict, has maxed out on all of the Australian companies, and they've lost much more than they can possibly afford. So if the companies were to link in real time their lockout arrangements, then that would go a very large way to protecting Australian gamblers. Now, Deputy Speaker, I've discussed this, and I won't name names or identify the company, but I have discussed this with leaders in the industry, and they tell me that the technology exists, it could be quickly done, and it would cost very little money. So here we have an initiative which I urge the government to embrace. The industry can do it, the public wants it, it won't cost much money, and it will protect gamblers, and in particular problem gamblers. Because remember, gambling addicts, when asked to set a daily limit when they're not in the zone, they will normally set a sensible limit. Gambling addicts, when they're not in the zone, they often know that they have an addiction and they want to do everything possible to deal with that addiction, and they will set sensible limits. It was the same way back in 2010, 11, 12, when I was campaigning for mandatory pre-commitment on poker machines. The knowledge that gambling addicts, in their lucid moments, set sensible limits. But if they're going to set a sensible limit, then we need to ensure that the industry implements that limit across all of the platforms. Also, Deputy Speaker, we really need to ban or at least rein in the advertising of these online gambling companies. Frankly, the community is sick to death of being bombarded with ads, particularly at either end of a sporting game, you know, on a Sunday night or a Saturday afternoon or whatever. We have this ridiculous situation in Australia where gambling advertising is banned during G-rated television times, but there's an exemption, a carve-out, if you will, for gambling advertising either side of sports events, which of course is when an enormous number of children are actually watching the telly. You know, they've turned on, they're sitting down there, they've got a bag of crisps, and they're about to, you know, the game's about to start, and little children are being bombarded with gambling ads. And gambling ads that are associated with their sporting heroes and the code of sport they love, obviously unacceptable. And Deputy Speaker, we've also got to stop predatory behaviour by these companies. I'm aware of gambling addicts who have shut down accounts with one online gambling company only to be cold called by an industry insider and to encourage them to set up an account with another gambling company, and then to eventually close down that account and to be cold called by someone within the industry who encourages them to open another account with another company. So there is clearly mischief going on within the online and sports betting sector. I don't know what it is, but somehow people are collecting lists of names and they're using that quite mischievously to prey on gambling addicts. We need to somehow clamp down on that. We also, Deputy Speaker, need to ensure that when an online gambling company is seeing gamblers gamble with what are the proceeds of crime, we need companies to be alert to that. And when it is discovered that an online gambler is gambling with the proceeds of crime, then the gambling companies need to be required to pay that money back to the victims of that crime. And in fact, Deputy Speaker, I moved a private member's bill in this place not that long ago that would have required gambling companies to repay the proceeds of crime, and regrettably, Deputy Speaker, it received no support from the government, no support from the opposition. Now, for the life of me, Deputy Speaker, I can't understand why that would be the case. I mean, we appreciate more broadly that proceeds of crime should be repaid, but not when it comes to the gambling industry, it seems. They're different. They shouldn't have that obligation, and I strongly disagree with that, and I condemn the government and the opposition for not supporting that private member's bill. Another bill that I have tried to progress in this place, which again, it's lapsed, it had received no support from the government and the opposition, was a ban on social casinos, those ridiculous games where people pay online to gamble, but they can't win anything in return. I mean, this is just bizarre. People are playing gambling-type games online. They're paying money to participate in the game, but there is no tangible winning at the other end to withdraw. Now, we might all think, oh, that's just ridiculous. Who on earth would gamble like that? Well, the fact is a lot of people gamble like that. Surely we should ban social casinos. And I make the point, again, I labour the point. Another private member's bill I've introduced into this place that received no support from the government or the opposition. Another example of how the gambling industry seems to have special status in this place and is treated absurdly favourably by governments and politicians. Deputy Speaker, I'm not going to give up though, and I have a private member's bill prepared which I will introduce into this place when I get an opportunity to ban loot boxes. Now, loot boxes, Deputy Speaker, is when you pay money for a so-called loot box. You pay money to win something to use in an online game, but you don't know what you're going to win until you paid your money and you open your virtual box to work out what you have won or that you've won nothing to use as a part of an online game. So I would have said, Deputy Speaker, that when you pay money to participate in a game of chance, during which you may or may not win a positive outcome, that's gambling by any definition. But yet loot boxes are legal in this country. So it'll be another test of the government, another test of the opposition, that when I move that private member's bill, whether or not they will support that. And I hope it's a test that they pass. And, Deputy Speaker, I would also add that there are other good members of the Australian Parliament who are trying to do good things. For example, Sterling Griff currently has a private member's bill in the Senate that would basically do what the committee has recommended here. So why doesn't the government, supported by the opposition, get behind Senator Griff's private member's bill in the Senate that would basically prohibit credit card use? I mean, the work's done. All the government opposition have got to do is line up on the day. So, Deputy Speaker, good work by the committee as far as they went, but heavens, there's a long way still to go. And I urge again the government and the opposition to do the hard work and to help protect gambling addicts.
Order. There being no further speakers, debate is adjourned and will resume as an order of the day for the next sitting. I call the member for Robertson.
Deputy Speaker, and I ask leave of the Federation Chamber to move that orders of the day number 2 and 3, committee and delegation business, be postponed until a later hour this day.
Is leave granted?
Granted.
I move that orders of the day number 2 and 3, committee and delegation business, be postponed until a later hour this day.
I second that.
I'll put the question. The question is that the motion be agreed to. All of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. And I call the clerk.
Committee and delegation business, order of the day number 4, report of the Joint Select Committee on Australia's Family Law System.
The question is the document be noted, and I call the member for Warringah.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Chair. I commend to the House the third interim report and the final report tabled on behalf of the Joint Select Committee on Australia's Family Law System, of which I am a member. In doing so, it is important I call on the government to actually act on these reports and the 2 reports that came before them from the committee. Don't let these reports sit on the shelf like so many similar reports from previous inquiries. It should be noted that there has been 67 different inquiries into the Family Law Act since it came into effect in January 1976. Unfortunately, there is a history of successive inquiries identifying similar systemic problems with our family law system and successive governments being unwilling or unable to make the necessary changes. When this inquiry was first announced at the end of 2019, I was sceptical that this was actually to implement real change and not just a political stunt. My concerns in relation to how this committee might be used and the process were real, because these are real people's lives. People are incredibly impacted by breakdown of family relationships, and they are turning to this inquiry for change. They're turning to the government for implementation of recommendations to feel that there can be progress in such a distressing area. As previously, before coming to this place, being a family law barrister, I have absolute experience of how distressing this area of law can be. It goes to the absolute core of people's lives, and having acted for both sides, for men and women, both parties, in property and parenting proceedings, it can be so distressing. And so this needs to become a bipartisan, and there needs to be political will to implement these changes. The reality is, in modern society, sadly, 40% of marriages end in divorce. And while many of those separations are conducted fairly and amicably, there are still many Australians who rely on the family law system to settle their divorce or separations and resolve disputes over property and custody of children. And most of us know someone who has gone through this, either separation or through the family law courts.
And to various degrees, this process can be adversarial, confrontational, emotionally unsettling, financially crippling and life-changing. If there's one thing we can never get back, it's time. And it is one of the major problems with the system. So for that reason, it's imperative that our family law system not only be functional, but it needs to be fair and well-funded, because they all go to that question of time and the time it takes for disputes to be resolved or determined. And so it is so important that the government take note of these recommendations. Over the course of the inquiry, we received more than 1,700 submissions, the majority from individuals detailing their incredibly personal cases and experience. And I thank all those who provided evidence and submissions to the inquiry. And despite the challenges of COVID-19, the committee held 13 public hearings and 13 in-camera hearings. And I'd like to thank all the people on the committee, but importantly also the Secretariat, for their tireless efforts in providing logistical and administrative support to the committee. The terms of reference for this inquiry were far-reaching, and on the whole, I feel they've been addressed by this inquiry. The key issues identified were the costs associated with the family law system, the adversarial nature of the family law courts, and whether we should move towards a more inquisitorial model, the issue of distressing delays in the current court system, the role of family consultants, expert witnesses and independent children's lawyers, enforcement and contravention of family law orders, and family violence, because it is considered in family law proceedings how it interacts with the family law system and the family violence jurisdictions. The first interim report canvassed the various themes and issues raised in evidence received throughout the first 12 months of the inquiry and was tabled in October 2020. The second interim report detailed the committee's conclusions and recommendations in relation to the family law system and was tabled in March 2021. The third interim report deals specifically with the issue of Australia's child support scheme, which emerged as a dominant issue during the inquiry. We expanded the inquiry with the aim of focusing specifically on child support scheme and its interaction with the family law system. The committee's goals were twofold. Firstly, to allow for a better analysis of the existing evidence, and secondly, to provide an opportunity to gather additional evidence through a further inquiry and better question key government agencies and stakeholders. The child support scheme is vital to society. It is a social policy, noting it supports over 1 million children and it involves approximately 1.25 million parents. There was a broad range of participants who were generous enough with the committee to provide their personal experiences with the child support scheme. And it's important to remember that the overriding objective of this scheme is to ensure that children, the innocent parties in all family breakdowns, receive a proper level of financial support from their parents. The overriding duty is that parents owe a responsibility they're financially responsible for children, and that can never be forgotten. The committee's recommendations also aim to improve the general operation of the scheme and the experience for both the payer and payee parents. Less than 40% of cases involved payments of $5,000 or more per annum, and that approximately 30% of cases actually had amounts payable of $500 per annum or less, which does make me question how those children are actually managing on such small supports. Importantly, the committee was also advised that the median child support payable under the formula was only $3,354 per annum, or approximately $65 per week, which really raises some questions of how well the formula is actually working. And one of the key themes identified by the committee was the general accessibility of the scheme. And that's why one of the recommendations is for the government to provide adequate resources to Services Australia to allow it to enhance child support scheme services and how it should work better with the courts. In particular, there was a recommendation of more consultation and more transparency. The Australian Government needs to reconvene regular meetings of the Child Support National Stakeholder Engagement Group and in particular recommended that there should be a meeting before the end of 2021 and that group should meet at least twice per year, and the group should publish minutes to promote accountability and transparency. Participants in the scheme want to know the scheme is being looked at, reviewed and assessed. Location of child support officers in the family law courts. There needs to be a better conjunction between the two schemes to ensure, well, with the scheme with the courts, to ensure that there is proper reference and that they are working together. One of the more shocking aspects was actually raised was the child support payment debt and government guarantee. So Australia currently has $1.6 billion of child support debt. And the report powerfully states that this is equivalent to stealing from children. So urgent action needs to be taken to reduce the existing child support debt levels and to promote the ongoing prompt payment of assessed child support, because those children need that financial support while they are children. So recognising this increasing level of debt and the negative impact it will have on children, the committee notes that a number of submitters proposed a guarantee mechanism to ensure payments are made to the payee parent irrespective of the parent's compliance. Essentially, a framework that would provide that it would become a debt to the government, which can be pursued accordingly through government services. The committee felt that this suggestion has merit because the government is better placed to recover outstanding debts compared to individual parents. Of course, the question of financial abuse and family violence featured prominently, because we must never underestimate financial abuse. That is the withholding of child support payment, which creates, and it needs to be recognised as, financial abuse. There were in all many recommendations, and I urge all those that participated to read the report in detail and to better understand where these recommendations can be. It really is important that the government engage with these issues. Ultimately, there were many questions of mental health that were raised because of the pressure of this system. So I would encourage anyone to seek help with Lifeline, Beyond Blue, and those numbers can be found. And ultimately to seek help that a breakdown of family relationship not be exacerbated by the system.
Order. There being no further speakers, I call you. Are you speaking on this item? No. Sorry. Don't get excited. I call the member for Robertson.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move that the debate be adjourned.
Question is the debate be adjourned. All of that opinion say aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The matter will be made in order of the day for the next sitting. And I call the clerk.
Government business, order of the day number 1, grievance debate.
The question is that grievances be noted. I call the member for Jagga Jagga.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, in the 3 weeks since we were last in this place, I've been pleased to be able to be meeting with my constituents again and meeting face-to-face rather than virtually, and it's been really good to be able to talk to people about how they feel our community and our country is travelling. And one of the clearest messages I've been receiving in the last 3 weeks is just how disappointed people are with the way that this Prime Minister does his job. And this came through to me very clearly during the Prime Minister's recent trip to Glasgow, when, as part of that trip, he decided to leak private text messages that he'd received from the French president. Now, in the conversations I've been having with people in my electorate, they were just aghast at this behaviour. They know that this isn't how they would behave in their own personal or professional dealings. They wouldn't leak private text messages to try and make a point. And yet the Prime Minister of our country is behaving in that way, is treating our foreign relationships in that way. They were genuinely appalled. And the conversations I've been having with many people are around how this Prime Minister is just not up to the job and continually fails to show the leadership that our community expects from someone in that role, that they don't expect that the person who is our Prime Minister will provoke an undiplomatic fight with a foreign leader because he's actually obsessed with his own image and pathologically unable to tell the truth. It is really distressing to people in my community, and it concerns them that that is the way this Prime Minister behaves. And of course, we returned yesterday to the theme of text messages and untruths during question time, when the Prime Minister initially in question time claimed 1 hour that he'd sent the opposition leader a text message to tell him that he was off to Hawaii during holidays during the bushfires, which we all remember very well. And then an hour later, after being called out about that, the Prime Minister retracted and explained to the House that, in fact, he hadn't told the opposition leader where he was going. So there's a pattern of behaviour that we see in this place, that we see outside of this place, and that people in our community see from this Prime Minister, who will say anything in the moment to score a political point. And it is genuinely unsettling for those of us in the community who think that this is a leadership role and that it should carry the qualities with it of being trustworthy, of looking out for the interests of others and not just looking out for your own interests. And Deputy Speaker, it was particularly distressing to see those qualities on display most recently in response to some terrible things that have been happening in my hometown of Melbourne. We have had some very difficult protests over the past couple of weeks. People protesting in front of our state parliament with mock gallows, pretending to, with images of politicians in our state. And that has been really difficult. And it is the type of behaviour that every political leader in this country should unreservedly condemn. But of course, with this Prime Minister, there was a but. There was a but because he's dog whistling and chasing votes from the fringe. A strategy that maybe he didn't want to reveal, but that was revealed very clearly by whoever's cutting the material for his Facebook page, where instead of posting in no uncertain terms condemnation of this type of behaviour, the Prime Minister instead posted the strategy lines that he'd obviously worked to put in afterwards. And it is really dangerous not to call out this behaviour, because not doing so deepens divisions in our community. It enables attacks on our democracy. And I say again, it is not what we expect of our leaders. Our leaders should be the people who bring us together, not the people who encourage division, not the people who encourage people who seem to want to be encouraging violence against other politicians in our country. The Prime Minister's failed to pull people on his own side into line. We still have government members sharing dangerous misinformation on their Facebook pages. And again, all of us have seen in our communities what the impact of that misinformation is having. It is putting people at risk. It means that people are getting information that is not medically sound, that is not actually the best advice for them and for their community, and it is being spread by government members. So I say again, it is so disappointing that the person who leads our country, who should be the person who brings us all together at this most difficult time, does none of those things and is in fact dog whistling and seeking to deepen divisions. The Prime Minister also at that opportunity took the time to give us some lines around how we all just want government out of our lives, and that made me reflect really on the record of this Morrison government in my home state of Victoria over the past couple of years during the pandemic. And I would like to share some times when I think actually we really would have liked government, and particularly the Morrison government, in our lives over the past couple of years. We would have liked them in our lives earlier this year when we should have had vaccines so that we didn't need any more lockdowns. But instead we had a government that failed to order the vaccines, that put us at the back, not at the front of the queue, at the back of the queue. And as a result, we've had a much more difficult year than we should have. We would have liked the Morrison government to be in our lives last year, when our aged care homes weren't protected as they should have been by the federal government that is responsible for aged care and responsible for the settings in aged care, responsible for the safety of people in aged care, and absolutely failed to do any of those things, absolutely failed elderly people in my community, failed their families, and we had deaths, and we had people who were afraid for their loved ones, and that just should not have been the case. So we would have loved to have had the Morrison government in our lives at those times. We would have loved for this government to have discharged its duty to have shown the leadership that we should have from a Prime Minister, from a national federal government in a time of crisis, but we did not get it. Time after time, we have a failure of leadership. We have this Prime Minister demonstrating that he will say whatever he thinks it takes to win, but he will not say the things that bring our community together. He will not say the things that put us on the track for a better future for all of us. Deputy Speaker, the other really big failing that people have been bringing up with me when I talk to people in my community is this Morrison government's failure to take any serious and meaningful action on climate change. So last time we were in this place, we had a lot of posturing from the government on climate change. We got told that apparently things were resolved now, and the Prime Minister had pulled the Nationals into line. We had an agreement, a commitment to net zero to 2050 and a plan to get us there. Well, we now know the plan was a sham. The modelling was fake. We're not even going to get there under this modelling. There's a gap for technologies that we'll apparently magically discover sometime in the future. And this is the plan this Prime Minister took to Glasgow. Not a plan, a sham. We are so far behind the rest of the world, and that will cost this country. That will cost us the jobs and the opportunities. As the rest of the world shifts to clean energy, we will miss out on those opportunities. As our planet continues to warm, we will not be doing the part that this country should do to make sure that we limit warming so that it remains below dangerous levels. This is critical. When I talk about leadership, this is a major challenge, and it is a challenge that this Prime Minister just refuses to pick up. Instead, he is apparently led by the Deputy Prime Minister, by the Leader of the Nationals, who's made it clear that even though he's a member of the government, he didn't sign up to any agreements out of Glasgow. So very unclear, is Australia a signatory to the agreements that came out of Glasgow, or are we standing aside and in fact making our pariah case even stronger? No wonder that Australia was ranked dead last as developed countries for both our policy and the actions we've taken in the space of addressing climate change. And Deputy Speaker, people in my community could not be clearer with me. They know this is urgent. They know that we need a genuine plan, not a sham, in place to address climate change. They know that time is running out, and they have seen through this government, and they have seen through this Prime Minister, and they are looking for genuine leadership. They aren't looking for more spin, for more focus group lines, for being bought off with sham modelling. What they want to see is a genuine plan, a genuine commitment, and a genuine way forward on climate change, but on all the things that should build our country back stronger and stronger for all of us as we come out of this pandemic. That's the leadership they're looking for. They're not going to get it from this Prime Minister. They will get it from Labor under Anthony Albanese, and people in my community are very aware of that.
Thanks again for the Jagger. The question is that grievance has been noted, and I call the member for Herbert.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. There is no question that the City of Townsville will play a major role in being a major producer of hydrogen into the future. We're making significant investments in hydrogen right now and around the country. And a couple of weeks ago in Townsville, it was a great pleasure to be able to make a major funding announcement for a world-first project. While we know hydrogen will play a key role in the future energy mix for Australia, there is technology to produce and put to use. It's still in its early development phase. That's why the project I'm about to outline is so key. Not only will it reduce the reliance of fossil fuels for a major North Queensland industry, it will help develop a model to be expanded and adopted across the nation and throughout the world. It's a concept that, once proven within just a couple of years, I have no doubt will be the envy of the world. Through the federal government investment of $15.5 million through the Clean Energy Finance Corporation and the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, 5 trucks will hit the road in Townsville powered by green hydrogen that's being produced in Townsville. The proponent is Arc Energy, a sister company of Sun Metals, which runs a zinc refinery, which has been operating in Townsville for decades. The investment will enable 2 things. Firstly, to be able to purchase 5 of large hydrogen fuel cell heavy haul trucks, and secondly, a 1 megawatt electrolyser to produce hydrogen powered by Sun Metals at their massive site, their solar farm. Ark Energy's Sun HQ Hydrogen Hub is expected to produce up to 158 tonnes of hydrogen a year. The 540-tonne trucks will transport zinc ore from Townsville Port to Sun Metals Refinery, where the hydrogen will be produced. The trucks will be able to refuel and return zinc to the port in a 30-kilometre round trip. Currently, these round-the-clock operations are powered by diesel. Under this project, they will avoid 1,300 tonnes of CO2 each year. Unfortunately, heavy freight has been a challenge for the industry because electric engines powered by batteries just don't have enough grunt to be viable. That's why hydrogen will be so important to this industry going forward. But running this fleet of 5 trucks is just the start. Ark Energy plans to upscale its operations within years to produce enough hydrogen to supply a domestic market, which is expected to see very strong growth. After that, they'll focus on export market with plans to send hydrogen offshore to customers throughout Asia. And everything that is learned about hydrogen throughout this project will also help others who are keen to improve their sustainability as well. We talk a lot in this place about targets and technology, and that's very important, but it's projects like these where our investments are fueling real initiatives on the ground, that we're getting on with our plans. Ark Energy and Sun Metals have runs on the board when it comes to reducing their reliance on the grid, and they have an Australian-first fleet of hydrogen-powered trucks moving freight around our city is a massive vote of confidence. This is the first investment in Australia by the CEFC through the Advanced Hydrogen Fund. That's a project in Townsville that will be the first cab off the rank when it comes to federal funding for hydrogen projects. And there will be no doubt more to come, with the National Hydrogen Strategy setting out a vision for Australia to become a major global hydrogen supplier by 2030. We're investing more than $1.2 billion to accelerate the development of an Australian hydrogen industry. This project with Sun Metals and Ark Energy is only the beginning. I've been working with a consortium of like-minded proponents who have a strong vision for hydrogen in Townsville and have joined forces to ensure this can happen. Together, we've formed NQH2, the consortium. Ark Energy is a part of that, as well as Origin Energy, a subsidiary of Kawasaki, who are already building strong links for future hydrogen export with markets in South Korea and Japan. Recently, NQH2 Consortium applied to the National Energy Resources Australia, or NERA, to establish Townsville as a declared hydrogen cluster. This would be excellent news for Townsville and put us on the national map as a city and a region that has hydrogen as a priority industry. I'd like to congratulate all the members of the consortium and Townsville Enterprise who have led the charge. This kind of thing needs to be community-led and industry-led. The one thing that I've kind of learnt in this place is nothing should be government-led. It should always be led by industry. It should always be led by the experts and led by the professionals. Government should be listening, allowing industry to determine the best path forward, providing the support, the environment, and stepping back and allowing them to get on with their job. They're the experts. I look forward to continuing to work with the consortium to identify and put forward further hydrogen projects to increase our contribution to this industry and make the most out of opportunity it provides. This is a big step for Townsville and it's in the right direction. We are going to be the first in Australia to have hydrogen-powered vehicles or large haul trucks. Nowhere else. This is great for the region and it will really develop our hydrogen technologies and experience to be able to help other communities and other places around Australia. Speaking of providing support to industry, it's been very good to see a number of businesses and organisations in the electorate of Herbert receiving support under our Economic Diversification Grants program. This program was developed in response to the 2019 monsoon flood event which devastated Townsville and North Queensland, to help businesses recover and emerge stronger by expanding their business. Four organisations in the electorate will share in more than $1.2 million worth of funding under the program. Fruit processing business, Simsha, does a fantastic job sending out local produce to the nation, and an investment of $400,000 will help them build a larger plant to process fruit, and which otherwise they wouldn't be able to do. A four-wheel drive hire business will be able to help more tourists get out and about enjoying our beautiful region with an investment of more than $335,000. A sport fishing charter will build a new vessel for offshore fishing charters and operate year-round after receiving a grant of $110,000. We're also supporting the Arcadian Surf Lifesaving Club to complete their final stage of their Alma Bay Clubhouse renovation and extension. This is a great investment. But all these investments aren't because of it's not because of me, it's because of them. They're the ones that come to me and to other members of Parliament with a plan, with a direction, with an idea. And I'm just happy that I can work side by side with them and allow them to achieve greatness, because this is, once again, this isn't government leading, this is industry, this is people, this is communities banding together to ensure that we in the regions can benefit from these kind of grants. The result will be better facilities for more volunteers to be able to patrol our beaches, keep swimmers safe. This is the Alma Bay. We know our city is still feeling the effects of the 2019 flood event, which is why we're investing in local and small businesses and organisations to help them grow and thrive and create local jobs. Across North and Northwest Queensland, 15 projects have received funding under this round of grants and will receive between $10,000 and $500,000 to diversify existing industries or start new ones. The Economic Diversification Grants program is one of 5 programs funded through the government's $60 million package to support long-term recovery of 14 local government areas hardest hit by the monsoon trough. The National Recovery and Resilience Agency are continuing to work hard to build back from the disaster. Communities are still devastated. We're also continuing to work closely with businesses, offering them a hand to expand and diversify with the recently opened Northern Australia Business Development Grants and Industry Transformation Grants. Under Business Development Stream, grants of between $50,000 and $2 million are available for small and medium businesses to create jobs and strengthen businesses and their capability on resilience through diversifying. This fantastic opportunity that we've committed to on an ongoing basis. It's another example of how we're asking small business what they want and be able to give them a helping hand up. I think the key is asking people what they want, not telling them what they need. Now, just before I finish up, there was a comment in the House today from an opposition member that was worried about what someone said around Sam Dastyari. And I just wanted to put it on the record, my view. My view of Sam Dastyari and what happened, I think, is a national disgrace. I think he's a traitor to this nation. To help his friend of the CCP through his position on the PJCIS and a position of being a senator, to inform someone who's been known to have ties with the CCP that person had their phone bugged is absolutely disgusting. Sam Dastyari is a traitor to this nation.
Thank the member for Herbert, and I call the member for Solomon.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I rise to talk about a couple of issues to do with members of the ADF who've served our nation and have not had the right thing done by them, and then about some firefighters that I want to acknowledge. A couple of days ago, there was an opportunity in this chamber to talk about Australian Defence Force training. Now, the debate finished before I had the opportunity to make a contribution, but what I would have said is that our training in the ADF is top-notch, is fantastic, but it doesn't come without its dangers, and even with the risk management that goes on nowadays, and even in the past, accidents do happen, serious accidents. I want to bring to the House's attention a serious injury that happened to one of my soldiers when I was in Malaysia on Rifle Company Butterworth. Darren Hazy, fantastic bloke, but he received a serious injury, and this was 1994. And since 1994, Hazy's been in a wheelchair. He had serious head injuries as well. He died a couple of times during the evacuation and was brought back. And I have been working with his advocates to get him a gold card. You're seriously injured in the service of our country during training, and you would think that they'd be well looked after.
Indeed.
Unfortunately for Hazy, his accident occurred a couple of months after a change in legislation, which has meant that he hasn't been able to receive a gold card, which might be unbelievable to those listening, that someone with a serious back injury that resulted in them not being able to use their legs in 1994, that they would receive a gold card. What I've asked successive Veterans Affairs Ministers to do is use their discretion because as time goes on, there will be further complications that Hazy needs to be able to just go to a medical professional and get the support that he needs. But for whatever reason, DVA and the Minister haven't been able to make that occur, and I appeal to the latest Veterans Affairs Minister in this government to use his discretion. And if it is that a gold card can't be given, then a white card be given, which Hazy's already got, but that has all conditions on it. Because Hazy is not going to the doctor to get unnecessary treatments. It's treatment that he needs as a result of his service. Now, he's had a Subaru, a vehicle to get around with modifications so he can drive it with his hands, and he's had that vehicle for over 20 years now, and Subis are good vehicles and they do well. But the Subi is clapped out. He told me the other day it's no longer safe to drive. So I want to get Hazy a new vehicle so he's got mobility so he can get to his medical appointments. But DVA has been faffing around with this for over a year. The new person managing his case says that, oh, we'll look around and see what we can do. Back when the accident happened and Hazy needed a vehicle, Defence actually paid for it rather than DVA. Now, DVA have said that they will pay for the modifications to the vehicle to allow it to be driven by hand. They won't pay for the vehicle, but they'll pay for modifications. Now, if his accident had happened 3 months earlier, they would have given him $39,810 towards a new vehicle. But because it happened 3 months after a change in legislation, he has to buy the vehicle. Mind you, he's still getting compensated the same amount that he was getting when he was a young soldier. So it hasn't kept up with the career progression that he would have had if it wasn't for the accident. So if anyone's listening to this and they own a Subaru dealership, he's after an Outback. And a Subaru Outback at the moment is $39,990. DVA will pay for the modifications but not for the vehicle, because he broke his back 3 months after a change in legislation and ministers haven't been able to see their way clear to make a determination for this Australian soldier. So the battle with Hazy, with his advocates, and I thank them, Peter and Andrew, will continue. One of my constituents is a veteran firefighter, Andrew Innes, 18 years in the force. A lot of firefighters get cancer. So Andrew got leukaemia, and then he was fighting that, and he was helped through workers' compensation during that fight. But then it came to a point where he was going to have to they encourage people on workers' compensation to return to the workforce. They work really hard, and he probably didn't rest as much as he could have during his chemo, and actually set him back a bit, and he got another cancer in his throat. And so he's fighting that, and I'm working with him and the NT government, who have done fantastic work bringing in compensation for these firefighters, because they all get cancer. They don't all get cancer, a lot of them do, because of their workplace. And we owe it to those who sign up to protect our country and our community. We owe them a bit better than that. So we want to be doing everything that we possibly can when those who serve our country and our community are in the fight of their lives. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, I just wanted to send a message of solidarity to all those Australians who are in the fight against cancer. During COVID, people haven't been getting their tests as much as they should. So get your tests. Some of the cancers and the reasons for them are linked to workplace issues. Some of them are genetic. But get your tests. Make sure that with our focus on COVID, we don't lose sight of the importance of getting all those tests, whether it be breast cancer screening or, when you turn 50, which I just did the other day, getting the bowel cancer test. It's important. So I want to send that message of support to Drew, who's fighting cancer, and thank him for his work as a Territory firefighter. And I also want to send a message of solidarity to my uncle, Ray Wellard, who is a former member of the Metropolitan Fire Brigade in Melbourne. So he's fighting cancer. And my mum, Chris, was only visiting her beloved brother 2 weeks ago. And Ray was frailer, she said, battling cancer. But he was walking and eating again, and the pain was under control. He's now settled into hospice care. So many Australian families have been through this journey where, there can be that rapid, that rapid dive when fighting cancer. And for family members, they wonder whether there'll be a final chance to say goodbye. So if I can't, mate, I just wanted to say you're a champion. You're a great bloke. Mr Deputy Speaker, my Uncle Ray's been resilient his whole life. When our mum, Nana, had Ray in hospital in Melbourne, the doctor said, your son's not going to make it. He's not going to get out of this hospital. Such were the health challenges he had at birth. But he had so many surgeries. He served with the Metropolitan Fire Brigade. He lived for 76 years. He had 2 kids, Dana and Paul. He lived a great life. He was a great uncle. We did so many good things with you, mate. Ferreting, spearfishing. We had a great life growing up with you as a great uncle. So God bless you, mate. Go well, Ray, in this battle against cancer. We're all with you. Good on you, mate.
I thank the member for Solomon. I'm sure your uncle would be very proud of you. The question is that grievances be noted, and I call the member for Ryan.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. And indeed, I do have a grievance, and that is that there is just not enough time to acknowledge all the wonderful young achievers and community leaders in the electorate of Ryan. I'd like to try and rectify that tonight. Each year I run the Young Community Leaders Award, where local schools nominate students who have gone above and beyond within our community. And the award recognises some of our talented young leaders who are the future of our community and make incredibly important contributions to our local area, both within their own school and within the broader community as well. The award is given to the students who have shown commitment to leading positive change. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, with your indulgence, I'd like to speak to some of the efforts of the recipients of these Young Leaders Awards. Firstly, to Eli, Year 4 at Brookfield State School. who promoted, organised and supported a food drive at the school to support Community Friends, a non-profit organisation that helps people who are homeless and those in need. Community Friends help by giving people food, clothing, shoes, blankets and support. A fantastic cause to support. Well done, Eli, for your community spirit and for looking after those who are less fortunate than ourselves. To Kaylee in Year 6 at Ferny Grove State School. Now, Kaylee is a passionate and friendly student who exemplifies inclusivity for all. She regularly engages in opportunities to offer service to the community and support local fundraisers. Kaylee has taken on the role as an environmental advocate in the school community. So, Kaylee, for your leadership both within your school and our wider community, congratulations on this award. To Miff, she's affectionately known as Miff, in Year 4 at Groverley State School. I had the wonderful pleasure of meeting this young lady. She coordinated with Artforce Brisbane to have an Indigenous artist visit the school and help the students to design an Indigenous artwork on the electrical box outside the school on Dawson Parade. It's a beautiful painting that I've seen in person, and I was glad to visit last week to give her the award. She should be very proud of her organisational efforts to assist her fellow students, to participate in a practical reconciliation activity and also to brighten up that old electrical box on Dawson Parade. To Charlie in Year 5 at Hilda Road State School. Now, Charlie and her sister Holly make up the GAPS Wacky Wildlife Sisters, as they call themselves. They are budding conservationists who are committed to engaging in activities within the local community that promote sustainability practices. The sisters created the Great Gap Fashion Swap, I should say, and were named as a finalist in the Brisbane Waste Smart Awards. So congratulations to Charlie and her sister Holly on this fantastic work, for having the initiative to set up your own special conservation initiative and to see that promoted and so successful and already award-winning in our local community. To Thomas, who's in Year 6 at the Kenmore State School. Now, Tom uses his initiative to lead school projects. He's been instrumental in further developing the school's Student Buddy program, the Recycling Initiative and the STEM Innovation projects. As school captain, he demonstrates the school values and is an excellent role model for all students at Kenmore State School. So well done very much to you, Thomas. You've obviously been recognised by your own peers as a student leader, but you're going above and beyond with the initiatives that you're leading for our wider community as well, and I sincerely congratulate you for that. To Mitchell, who's in Year 6 at the wonderful Upper Brookfield State School. Now, Mitchell leads by example and is a reliable and dependable presence at the school. He is dedicated to ensuring that all of the jobs that need to get done are done with no fuss, making the school a positive place for all. When I go and talk to students about leadership, particularly those in in primary school, I should say, I talk to them about the fact that you don't have to wear a badge to be a leader. We're all leaders can all be leaders in our own school. Every time you pick up a piece of rubbish, every time you invite somebody new to play with you, every time you ask a friend if they are okay, you're showing leadership. And Mitchell is one of these students at Upper Brookfield State School who is always thinking of others and always just gets the job done in a no-fuss way. So well done, Mitchell, and keep up the very good work. And it's pleased to see some recognition for your quiet achievements. To Mikey, in Year 6 at Our Lady of Assumption, OLA, again, I had the pleasure of meeting this young man. He's an outstanding leader in and outside the school community. He is passionate about the future of the planet, and he has been instrumental in initiating change to the OLA community with a focus on students' emotional and social well-being. Mikey is an outstanding school captain at OLA. I know he's got some very proud parents that I had the great pleasure to meet, who are also a fantastic support for his efforts. But Mikey, well done, particularly on supporting your fellow students. As we've been through the COVID pandemic over the last 18 months, it's been so important to check in on each other and to make sure that you're doing okay, and your focus on welfare in particular was very impressive. So well done, Mikey. To Aidan, Year 6 at the Brisbane Independent School. So Aidan is a leader as a senior student and continually thinks of how he can advocate for change within the school. He regularly co-hosts whole school meetings and organised a 2021 survey of the student body to identify what equipment the kids wanted at the school. He helped to fundraise for the new equipment also, and Aidan coordinated a mobile muster which recycles old and unwanted phones. Finally, as if that wasn't enough, Aidan's done quite a lot. Aidan coordinated an appeal to have the student toilets refurbished to ensure students feel safe and welcome. Well done, Aidan, particularly on the democratic way you went about achieving change, surveying your fellow students and then raising the funds for it. It's an incredible achievement. To Matthew, Year 9 at Brisbane Boys College. Matthew is the Semester 2 President of the Middle School Leaders. He has overseen the Containers for Change initiative, something that many members of this House are familiar with, promoting recycling in his school community. Matthew, along with the BBC middle school leaders, are on track to raise at least $1,000, which will be donated to charity at the end of this year. Well done very much, Matthew, on your community spirit, and again, for looking out and raising funds for those who are less fortunate than ourselves, but also for your practical leadership of your fellow students. To Rachel at Year 12, St Peter's Lutheran College, where my wife went. It's a very excellent school. Rachel is an outstanding leader in and outside the school community. As a college vice captain, she has helped lead the school through various challenges and opportunities throughout the year. She has had a positive influence on her peers and the wider community. She always seeks to support and encourage others. She goes above and beyond in her service to the school. Well done, particularly on inspiring your fellow students. Leadership, as most of us know in this place, is not about the accolades that you can achieve for yourself or what you can achieve on your own, but the way that you inspire those around you to also achieve and to accomplish the best that they are able to achieve. To Willow in Year 10 at the Glenleighden School. This is a very special school with very wonderful kids who overcome a lot of odds to be successful. Willow is always one of the first ones to put her hand up to help. Willow has done over 80 hours of community service for Rosie's this year, helping to make food and toiletry packs for the homeless. Willow has completed her food handling course at TAFE to assist in serving lunch for patrons at Rosie's. Well done, Willow. Well done not only for your service, but also for taking the initiative of getting additional training for yourself so that you can further help. To Jack in Year 12 at Mitchelton Special School. Now, Jack is a real young leader for his school community and is the Vice President of the senior cohort. He has worked hard across several work experience opportunities locally and always looks out for others at school and encourages safe, respectful behaviours. He shows the characteristics that I know will see him make a remarkable impact in all that he does. Well done, Jack. To Indiana in Year 10 at Brigidine College. Indiana is one very busy student. She is the member of the Enviro Club, the St Vincent de Paul Society Group, and has received an Academic Excellence Award. She works tirelessly to support aims and objectives of the service clubs she's in at college and is a credit to the school. Well done, Indiana. To Chloe in Year 10 at Brigidine College, another busy rock star of the Year 10 at Brigidine. She is in the Justice and Democracy Group, the Model United Nations Club, the Enviro Club, and the St Vincent de Paul Society, and she gives her all to each and every one. And finally, to Grace and Connor at Mount Maria College, both in Year 12. They are described by their principal as generous and diligent in their leadership. Congratulations on everything that you are achieving.
I thank the member for Ryan. The question is that grievances be noted, and I call the member for Cowan.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to use my time today during this grievance debate to put on record some of the issues for Cowan constituents with the NDIS. Of the top 3 issues that my office deals with, I would have to say that NDIS is one of the top 3, along with immigration. And the issues that arise keep my office incredibly busy. I want to start also by paying heed to the member for Maribyrnong and the Shadow Minister, who's also the Shadow Minister for the NDIS, for his strident advocacy for people with disabilities and for his keeping the government to account on ensuring that the NDIS delivers for people with disabilities in the way in which it was intended to. And on that topic, Deputy Speaker, I just want to start by reminding the House and reminding this chamber exactly why and what the NDIS is supposed to do. And I'm going to do that by quoting from the NDIS website. This is what the NDIS website says in terms of the NDIS Participant Service Guarantee regarding plan approvals and reviews. And it says, the NDIA must make decisions about access, plan approvals, plan reviews and nominee changes within these timeframes, within a suitable timeframe. And it says this gives participants, families and carers greater certainty about how long processes will take. Absolutely. Families of children with disabilities, participants in the NDIA, absolutely deserve to have that level of certainty about the processes. They deserve to be kept informed about the processes, and they deserve to have their plans dealt with in a timely fashion. The second quote that I want to use is in terms of continuity of supports guarantee. And the website ndis.gov.au says this. It says governments have committed to ensuring people with disability who are currently receiving services are not disadvantaged in the transition to the NDIS. That's a principle there. That's a core principle, that people who are receiving services prior to being onto the NDIS are not disadvantaged in their transitioning to the NDIS. So a timely manner in processing and no disadvantage in the transition. And of course that each participant has access to timely and appropriate support without interruption. 3 key pillars of the NDIS as articulated on the NDIS website. I'm sorry to say, Deputy Speaker, that I could go on and on about the number of cases that have presented to my office that demonstrate the failing of the NDIS on these pillars, on timely access, on not being disadvantaged, and the impact that that has on NDIS participants and on their families. And I'll start with the case of a 14-year-old boy in Tapping, in the Cowan community. And this boy has complex challenges posed by autism. He's got celiac disease and he requires significant support, including some significant supports for his complex needs around his behaviours. His family are at breaking point, Deputy Speaker. Every family member has developed some serious mental health conditions due to the stress associated with their care responsibilities. Now, prior to the NDIS, they had a large amount of support. They had a significant amount of support through support workers. They had respite in the form of specialist camps for children with autism, and they were able to access those specialist camps and that respite 4 times a year. But the NDIS plan for this young man, for this 14-year-old boy, fell well short of the funding levels to maintain those supports. And they had next to no funds for a support worker. They had no funding for those camps and limited funding for therapy. His NDIS review did not consider the complex needs of the family and provided the same outcome, leaving the family left only with the possibility of appeal through the AAT process. Once at the AAT, despite the plan's funding being exhausted, leaving the family with no supports for him, and a deteriorating situation as a result, the minister repeatedly refused to intervene or to make an interim plan for this family. When the AAT requested an interim plan, the NDIA continued to delay giving that interim plan. And in the end, they gave him the same plan that he was previously on, that his family had been appealing, that they took all the way to the AAT to appeal. The delays and the refusal of the minister to intervene, despite evidence of the need for this young man and his family, is nothing short of cruel. Nothing short of cruel. Another case is a woman in Cowan who is wheelchair-bound and requires full assistance with all personal care and mobility. Her support coordinator submitted a change of circumstance request in May of this year. In June of this year, she wrote to my office. As the funding had been exhausted, she was at very high risk of pressure sores, neglect, homelessness, hospitalisation, because she had no funding to pay for her supports. She needed to move out of her residence and was subject to neglect and abuse in her living arrangements. Now, after my office contacted the NDIS for a plan review meeting, the planner finally made contact with the Specialist Support Coordinator to make an appointment. That's months after a meeting was first sought. And it was only just this month the SSC, the Support Specialist Coordinator, contacted our office because the situation had become so dire, and still no plan has been approved. So this woman with a disability who is wheelchair-bound, who requires personal care and mobility and has mobility issues, is currently in an abusive and neglectful situation with no support funding. Deputy Speaker, they're just two cases that demonstrate that there is no dignity for people with disabilities under this government's dysfunctional NDIS. There is no continuity of care. There is no certainty. Those pillars of the NDIS that are mentioned in my opening, they're failing on all of those accounts. There is no adherence to service standards or principles of standards for the NDIS. Deputy Speaker, I fully believe that the measure of society is how it treats its most vulnerable. The measure of society is how it treats its most vulnerable. We pride ourselves here as a developed nation that we do not leave people behind. We do not leave people with disabilities behind. We want them to live a full life and have a quality of life. Sadly, the NDIS that is meant to ensure that people with disabilities would not be left behind is doing that very thing. It is leaving them behind. It is leaving them in vulnerable situations. It is not meeting the very basic human principles for which it was set up in ensuring that people with disabilities have the support services they need, and that they get those support services in a timely fashion and in ways that do not compound the already dire circumstances under which they live. Deputy Speaker, we can and we should do better.
Thank the member for Cowan, and I call the member for Sturt.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker. I would like to make some comments this evening on some challenges and opportunities that I believe we have in this nation in the months and years ahead, on two similar linked themes. One is the opportunities of migration and the other is the challenges of housing affordability. I think they are linked because, frankly, in the comments I'm about to make, you'll see that I'm very supportive of seizing the opportunity of a new era of migration into this country, but equally believe that we need to have a plan to address sustainable population growth in the right way and in the right parts of this country, and at the same time take an opportunity to address challenges in housing affordability. Now, I'm lucky enough to be, at the moment, serving on the Tax and Revenue Committee, and we're in the middle of a housing affordability inquiry, and in no way do I intend to comment on an inquiry that is underway and predetermine what that inquiry might find. But an undisputed fact is that housing affordability is an enormous challenge in this nation right now. And it's an odd predicament for a nation like Australia. Not many people in other parts of the world would think that we had challenges of housing affordability. When they were giving out continents, not many countries got one to themselves. You know, we are an island continent nation like no one else on the planet. We have a comparatively small population for the size of our landmass. Obviously, I accept that continental Australia isn't ubiquitously inhabitable like some other continents, but nonetheless, it would surprise most people, and I think it surprises people in this country, that given the abundance of land that we have as a nation, that we have these challenges of housing affordability. And that is regretful, because I am a firm believer that one of the most important things for someone's future security, their economic security and that of their family, is for them to be able to own their own home and have that economic and social stability that you get from having no stress or concern whatsoever about having shelter for yourself and your family. Hopefully not just anything, but something you're proud of and something that allows you to genuinely enjoy the time that you have when you're in that home. And it is surprising that not just really in the major cities, they are acutely difficult from a housing affordability point of view at the moment. I'm obviously talking about Sydney and Melbourne and really Brisbane, and perhaps even the entire southeast corner of Queensland could be put into this category, where we've had, particularly in the pre-COVID times, very significant rapid growth of population in those areas. That's put a lot of pressure on housing prices. It's also put pressure on infrastructure and other services, and that has created some tensions in debates about managing and some arguing to limit population growth in some of those areas. I come from Adelaide, of course, being the member for Sturt, and a state of South Australia which has had much lower population growth, both in Adelaide and more broadly in South Australia, yet we too are struggling with very significant housing price increases and challenges for younger people to be able to get into the housing market. The reason I want to link this to immigration, of course, is that one of the great strengths of South Australia decades gone by, particularly in the post-Second World War era, we had two very substantial advantages economically. One was low-cost housing, and the other was relatively very cheap electricity. And that provided an opportunity for the establishment of substantial manufacturing. Obviously, one of the more iconic industries in South Australia was the car industry, but many others, white goods, etc. And of course, South Australia and Adelaide was an enormous attraction for post-Second World War migration, commencing obviously with European migration, particularly those of Greek and Italian descent. I note, of course, having the member for Adelaide here, we're very proud and lucky of the contribution that those who are from the generations that came in that period and the contribution they make to our country, and of course the other waves of migration that we've had in more recent times. And I think no one would disagree in 2021, despite some of the disappointing elements of migration debate in this country in the decades gone by, that we would be a shadow of the nation that we currently are, were it not for the immigration that we've had into this nation over a very long period of time, and of course the multicultural society that we have now. And I think we are in another post-Second World War era for this nation, where, again, given our relative impressive and exceptional response to the challenges that we've faced as a nation, I don't mean to be political and talk about the government here, I genuinely mean as the people of Australia, the way in which we have responded to the coronavirus challenges and demonstrated to the world once again that Australia is such an appealing place to make your future and to come for opportunity and security. And this will be a great thing for this country if we embrace another wave of migration into Australia in this post-COVID period like we did in the post-Second World War period. And I think it's equally important that we think very carefully about the places and parts geographically of this nation where there are opportunities for more substantial population growth than others. It's not for me, being from Adelaide, to make comment on the size of cities like Sydney and Melbourne, but I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest that they are very substantial, large cities with challenges that befall them with very high rates of population growth. I'm not suggesting they shouldn't grow like they have been over the last few decades, but it might be that there are pressures in those big cities to bear the brunt of a significant new wave of migration. But there is certainly enormous opportunities in a city like Adelaide and a state like South Australia. We are a city-state. If you drew a 100-kilometre line from the GPO of Adelaide, which picks up all of the Adelaide Hills and down the Fleurieu Peninsula to Victor Harbour and right up through the Barossa Valley, etc., really 90% of the population of South Australia is within 100 kilometres of the Adelaide GPO, even though you could fit France and Germany in the geographic boundaries of the state of South Australia. And of course there are a lot of regional centres, not just in South Australia but around our country, that could quite easily accommodate large new numbers of migration that were adequately coupled with the appropriate housing opportunities for those people, and of course the economic opportunities need to be there so that the jobs are there. But one thing that we are hearing more and more consistently, particularly in regional areas, is the challenge of workforce, the challenge of getting people, businesses saying, we don't have trouble getting the capital, we don't have a lack of confidence in our ideas, but we cannot commit to major economic opportunities in regional parts of Australia because we don't have the confidence in being able to get and retain the workforce. And we had these problems before in Australia, where opportunities were there but lacked the adequate, reliable supply of workforce, and we met those challenges through migration and the waves of migration that came into this country, particularly in the post-Second World War era. And I think that opportunity is upon us again now in the post-COVID period, in the 2020s and beyond. We need to have some political unity around that, which I hope there is some appetite for, and we need to think very sensibly and carefully about how that strategically can be undertaken and exploited. In the final moments that I've got, I'm a particular advocate for differentiated migration on a regional basis, and for working with, there are parts of this country that are desperate for migration, and the problem is that, of course, in the past we've had people that have migrated to Australia but largely been attracted to the major cities, particularly Sydney and Melbourne, and I would like to see us be a lot more strategic and targeted at providing pathways for people to come into this country, but in circumstances where they're going to the regions that really need them, providing the workforce, the economic stability, and in return them having great opportunities for a fantastic life and future here in Australia.
I thank the member for Sturt for that interesting speech. The time for the grievance debate has expired. The debate is interrupted in accordance with Standing Order 192B. The debate is adjourned and the resumption of the debate will be made in order of the day for the next sitting, and I call the member for O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy Speaker. I move that the Federation Chamber do now adjourn.
Is the motion seconded?
I second the motion.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. All those of that opinion say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The Federation Chamber stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.